Which brings me now to what's going on in Kenosha. So I'll just quickly go over this, the news here. Washington Post reports, after video shows Wisconsin police shooting a black man multiple times, National Guard called into Kenosha. I'm sure most of you have heard the story already. It's about a man named Jacob Blake. He rounds the front of a silver SUV on Sunday with 2 Kenosha, Wisconsin police officers following close behind, their guns drawn. When Blake opens the door and steps inside, the officers suddenly fire into his back at least 7 times. He's currently in serious condition. The officers have been placed on administrative leave, and the city of Kenosha declared emergency curfews after protests rocked the city into early Monday morning. Another curfew was set for Monday night, while the governor announced he had called in the National Guard. So the video goes viral. I think calling in the National Guard was the right thing to do.
I agree.
Especially after the George Floyd riots got as crazy as they did.
Yeah.
But a lot of people right now, it's really coming down on partisan lines.
Mm-hmm.
On the left, they're like, how could the police shoot a guy 7 times in the back? On the right, they're saying he was clearly resisting officers' orders. He reached into a vehicle. The cops are justified. So I'll just jump to it. You're a Republican. You're in a very blue district, but you've also grown up, and you grew up in the 4th Ward, which is I'll let you describe it because
the 4th Ward is good fun. Bring your family and kids. It's a great place to be.
I think.
But no, 4th Ward is it's not. Put it like this. It's always been a pretty dangerous place. As a child growing up, even though it was dangerous, we didn't have the amount of shootings that we have today. Now it's like literally, if you have the Newsbreak app on your phone, literally every other day, sometimes every single day, someone's getting shot.
So here's what I'm thinking. I'm really curious as to your opinion on defunding the police. Specifically on what these cops did with this guy. So apparently there's a man of the same name who lived on that block, because we don't know if exactly it's him. I'm assuming it is, but he had an open warrant for 3rd-degree felony sexual assault. There's also news circulating that at one point he was arrested for illegally having a concealed firearm or something to that effect. I'm wondering if the cops took that information when they were going in and said, hey, there's this guy, or whether they knew or they didn't. But I'm curious your thoughts on this situation and defunding the police, considering you live in an area which is 35 minutes outside of New York. You're running as a Republican, and you're in an area that's, I guess, not too great.
Yeah. So
what do you think, man?
So to touch on the situation that happened in Minneapolis, when I saw the video at first, the first thing I said is, listen, we don't have all the facts, and even what you're telling me right now that this guy could have possibly, had warrants existing or whatever, I don't know that. So I'm not gonna completely double down and say that this guy was in the wrong or whatever. What I will say is this: the shooting 7 times is absolutely unnecessary. I think that was a little bit excessive. Now, another thing I will say though is, regardless of what stance you are, in a situation where anybody, not just a police officer, has a gun aimed at you, you don't turn your back on somebody with a gun aimed at you. And from the way that it looked in the video, he was trying to get in the car. Some people say he was getting in the car. Some people say he was reaching for something. The only thing that I'm focused on is when you got to the car, your hands are not visible, right? You're opening into a vehicle that they don't know what's inside that vehicle.
Right.
Now, maybe these police officers weren't trained effectively. I don't know what the situation was, but you shot this guy up, right? Maybe he had a gun, maybe he didn't have a gun, right? We don't have the facts on that. The problem that I have, though, is when people emotionally jump to something and start burning down the city, like we have,
right.
like we've got going on right now. I firmly believe that the only way to fix this problem is to reform the police. Now, you see what happened in New York. They cut back, I believe it was $1.7 billion from the budget. Cut about $1.7 billion off of the budget. They closed off the crime task force in New York, and crime shot up almost 200+%. Now, a lot of people are leaving New York. People are even leaving and moving into my city of all. I don't know why, but you're moving into my city of all places, and they're bringing in a lot of that violence as well too. A lot of the people believe that we got to get rid of the police. In Patterson, for example, about 2 days ago, and like I told you, I got the video up on my website where I went up and I spoke with some of these Black Lives Matter protesters, kind of just, pick their brain, see what's on their mind, because they painted this mural in the middle of the street. And when I started speaking with them, a lot of them had the mentality of, well, we need to defund the police and get rid of the police. And I said, okay, so I'm going to play devil's advocate here. If we defund the police, then what? What's the solution? Because New York isn't defunded. They just cut the budget, and you already see the ramifications of that. If you're talking about a complete, total defunding of these police, what's the solution? What do you replace it with, right? Are we going to rebuild a community task force? That's going to take some time, and we ain't got time. right? So the only solution that I see in place is there has to be a way to clean up the police from within, right? When George Floyd passed away, this was the time when I announced what I created. It's called the JARO bill, stands for Justice, Accountability, and Reporting Officers bill, right? And this is an idea that I had shortly after the time that Eric Gardner got killed, but I had no aspirations for running for Congress or anything at that point. I just figured now would be a great time to talk about it. And what I feel is when something happens in an internal investigation, right? And in this case, I brought up to these young individuals with Black Lives Matter. I brought up a case that happened to a guy named Jameek Lowry in Paterson, New Jersey. Now, this gentleman, he walked into a police department. He was on a live stream. Some people say he was on drugs. Some people say he wasn't. That's besides the point. But he gets on the camera and he starts talking about how he's afraid someone's after him and they're gonna kill him or whatever. Long story short, he leaves in an ambulance. The following day, his face is swollen shut and he's dead. There's still no proper answer as to what happened. The Paterson Police Department, they did an investigation to try and see what happened. Internal investigation said no wrongdoing. We did nothing wrong.
We investigated ourselves and found we did nothing wrong.
Exactly my point.
Yeah.
So you raise the biggest issue in this problem, right? Because when this happened, I told him, I said, I asked him, he's like, do you really believe that the Paterson administration or even the administration of the state of New Jersey cares about Black lives? And he said, no, I don't believe they do. And I say, well, they didn't give us any justice or any solid answers for what happened to Jameek Lowry, yet they're allowing you to paint a massive Black Lives Matter logo in the middle of the street.
Dude.
This is a virtue signal.
Yeah.
This is not action. This is not progress. You know, it's a symbol in the sense that, like, hey, you know, they're listening to us, but they're listening to you to paint in the street. They're not answering the actual questions.
Bread and circuses.
That's exactly what it is.
Throwing out bread, the crowd cheers.
And that's it. They forget about it.
Yeah.
You know? So then I said, listen, what needs to be done to fix the situation is we have to find out, we need to create an organization that can police the police. Because if the police are policing us, who polices them, right? Who watches the watchmen? So the way that I feel that something like this would get resolved is there needs to be a new elected class. We have freeholders, well, something else now, because Governor Murphy said it's whatever he's going to call it. You know, freeholder, mayor, councilman, all this stuff. There needs to be something else called, in this case, I'd call like the community justice officer, right? This is the person who, say a situation like Jameek Lowry happens, right? They go to this person, hey, listen, we need you to help us investigate the situation. We can't really count on the police to give us a thorough investigation. Now, there's two things that are wrong with that problem is what if that person gets corrupted by the local police departments, right? Okay, cool. So that brings two parts. Or what if the police aren't cooperating with this person, right? The next phase is the federal government, the Department of Justice, I believe, needs to create a national police department. Right?
Interesting.
Because we've already got the FBI. The FBI gets involved in some of these cases only when it's very high profile. You know, massive drug deals or the George Floyd situation where it's a nationwide kind of thing. That's the only time they get involved. So I believe that the Department of Justice needs to create this national police force. Their job solely is to investigate the police officers, right? Have the same ability to get into the information, check out the evidence, just like the FBI can, right? Now, they can also prosecute these police officers if they find something wrong. The reason why I believe this has to come from a federal level is because, one, they have no allegiance to the state police. They have no allegiance to the municipal police as well, too, right? Their job is solely to get to the bottom of the problem and prosecute. Now, with a situation like this, the next question someone asks is like, well, what if the FBI, what if the Department of Justice gets corrupted, right? Let's say there's a guy in New Jersey who's working there. I wouldn't want that. I would want an officer from Montana to go and investigate what's going on in New Jersey or something to that effect. Second phase of that is I also believe that police officers need to go through more routine training. They typically go through 6 months in police academy. Every now and then they brush up on their firearm skills, brush up on CPR, and that's about it. But if you're a doctor, dentist, or any one of these really high profile jobs, you have to renew your license periodically. Being a police officer is a very complicated position, right? You gotta do all kinds of stuff, deal with mental health, deal with, de-escalation, all kinds of things like that. So I believe that at least once or twice a year, these police officers would have to go through this training all over again. And I believe there should be an incentive for it as well too, right? If you go to a class that teaches you how to disarm a gun or whatever the case may be, right? I believe that police officers should be compensated for that. They should be given preferential treatment for doing these kinds of things. The reason why I say this is because if these justice officers come and they do an investigation, they can go down the list. Okay, Officer Brown did this, 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 and this. Well, then why did you mess up?
Right.
How did you mess up? The next problem we've got going on here is the unions. It's very difficult to get rid of the unions. And I have no intention of getting rid of the unions. They're there for a very specific reason, and I understand that. The problem I have with the unions is They're going to protect the police to make sure that they look as good as possible so that they can continue to get the funding so that the police can continue to pay the unions and keep their existence together, right? And for these reasons, there's some good officers, and I've spoken with lots of them and told them the same idea. They agree with me. You know, there's lots of very good officers that want to do the right thing, but it's very difficult to do the right thing when the union controls what's going on. You try and go against the grain, and they can make your life very, very difficult, you know? So if they're not going to rat or snitch on each other or throw each other under the bus, my solution is this. As a police officer, if your job is to uphold the law, you should be held to a higher standard. If you do something as wrong as stealing 2 pennies from somebody, and we find out, you're doing 15 years.
15
years.
The cop, you say? Or?
Yes, the cop. The reason why I say this is because how can you enforce the law and you're not willing to accept the full punishment for you violating the law you're supposed to uphold in the first place, right?
But are you exaggerating the 15 years? Like you're just saying like you commit a crime, you do the time.
Correct, essentially. And
right.
Now it's like now of course we have to work out the legalities here of whether this will make sense or not. But the point that I'm making is like if we find out that you've done something wrong, you have to face the penalties for it.
Absolutely.
You have to. You can't, because like it's too often where, you know, a police officer does something ridiculous and they kind of just walk off with like a slap on the wrist, administrative leave, or whatever the case may be. And we shouldn't have situations like that. I
got a guy off in I shouldn't say it that way. I got a guy found innocent. Get that one clipped, everybody. He was filming on the sidewalk. Cop came up and arrested him. Lied on the arrest report that the dude was obstructing a street.
Right.
And I had footage of it, so my footage got the guy proven not guilty. Put it that way, everybody. But the officer, nothing ever happened.
You see?
So this lady got to lie under oath to get someone arrested, and we had video evidence that she lied. Nothing happened.
Of course.
That's too much for me.
Exactly. And it's like situations like that happen all the time, and that's just a small situation, right? So now, if something like that happens, now let's say they're investigating Officer Brown. The chief knows, the union knows, everybody knows that this guy messed up. Right? He didn't follow his training. He did whatever the case may be. You're trying to protect that guy. Now you're obstructing their investigation. You go down with him as well.
It's tough, though. Like, you look at what happened in Kenosha, and when you look at it without any context, I can frame the story of Kenosha this one way. A guy was walking to his car after breaking up a fight. The police officers then decided to stop him because he was refusing their orders and fired 7 times in the back. It was excessive. Man, this is what the left is saying. He was just trying to break up a fight. He was doing the right thing. His kids were there. That's one way to frame it. I could frame it another way. A wanted rapist was trying to flee from the police and reached into his vehicle. It's a very different, very different way of looking at it.
Right.
Of course, the left, because it empowers their ideology and their narrative, will go with the, oh no, this poor man. And there are many conservatives who are saying, well, he reached in the van. It was justifiable. I think the truth is a little closer to the middle.
Right.
Look, the cops are, trying to stop you. He was trying to flee. But you look at this and you wonder about whether the cops here should face, some kind of penalty. If they entered this and they were told as they're driving in, we have a man who has an open warrant for felony sexual assault, possibly armed, past conviction for illegal concealed weapon, be advised. And then the cops pull up thinking like, this guy is not only a violent abuser of women, but he could have a gun, right, and he's ignoring us, and he reaches in the vehicle. Did those cops do anything wrong? If that's how they were, told to go in, it's when I see stories like this, and many other stories, it sounds like the real issue, like Breonna Taylor, for instance, the issue is the system.
Right.
The system has flaws.
I agree. And
we need to set it up in a way to maximize the protection of individuals, everybody, minimize the loss of life. I'm sure you read about the Breonna Taylor stuff.
Yes.
I was reading about it, and it's really difficult. They're saying arrest the officers, and I'm like, I don't like the idea of plainclothes no-knock raids, but it seems like that was the problem.
I agree.
They were told to go do this, and they were like, okay. And that's why I was like, dude, it was awesome that you were like, I'm not going to do something I think is wrong. These cops should be like, yeah, I'm not kicking someone's door in plain clothes,
So, for example, a situation like that makes perfect sense. Let's say a police officer says, hey, I'm not going to do something. I feel it's illegal or whatever, right? This police officer should have the ability to go and speak to these officers in the Department of Justice. Listen, they're trying to tell me to do something illegal. Regardless of what the union tries to say or do, it's like when the investigation really comes down to it and they can find out that these police officers were giving you an unlawful order, then you're clear. Because even what's going to happen here in Kenosha, they're going to do an investigation. Like you said, there's some people on the right that are like, well, he reached into his car, et cetera, et cetera. People on the left say, hey, whatever, right? No matter what answer that the police department puts out, no one's going to care. People are going to try and burn down the city and do whatever the hell they want, primarily because it's like, oh, well, the police killed him. They allowed it to happen. And now they're saying it's all good. They're going to burn the city down. Right. So this is the reason why I believe there needs to be a third party that's completely unbiased, that has nothing to do and has no allegiance and could care less whether you're in the right or wrong. They just need to get to the bottom of it. Right. I believe that's the only logical solution to this, because until we can come up with something, or if there ever will be, and I highly doubt there will be, a solution where it's a community-based police force, where it's just as organized as the police forces we have today, this is what we have. And with when we have a system like this in place, the police are left with three options. If there's a scumbag police officer on the force, you got three options. You either stop what you're doing and do the right thing, you quit, or eventually you get caught. And when you get caught, you're going to prison. Mm-hmm. Those are only three options. This isn't going to hurt the unions at the end of the day. You want to protect your guys. I get that. It's in your best interest to have the best police officers on the force, period. Right? So and I get you guys want to protect them, but the more you have better police officers on your force that are better trained, that are routinely getting trained, there's no excuses for them to go out there and do nonsense like this.
Everything you're saying is the opposite of defund the police.
Well, yeah, of course, because it's like defunding, it's not going to work. It's not going to work.
More training. More resources.
So of course it's gonna require, because I'm a big advocate of increasing the funding for police. People say, "Whoa, increase! Well, how do you expect them to get this training?"
Trump's saying the same thing,
right? How do you expect to hold them accountable? Because like when you start wearing thin their resources, like I had a conversation with my friend the other night, and he was saying like, if something like this happened in Patterson, man, like what would happen? What if there was a riot? What are we gonna do? And I'm like, in all honesty, man. Patterson, I believe they have about 2 or 3 of these armored vehicles, right, for these raids for, drug dealers, whatever the case may be. They probably got about 3 or 4 of them. They don't have the power to do a massive full-scale operation, just go and crack down on everybody overnight. This is just my opinion, what I believe. And even if something like that were to happen, they'd be stretched really thin for resources. If a riot ever took place in Patterson, they'd have to call in the National Guard.
Yeah.
Right. They'd have to. So what a lot of people need to understand is like the police, they're humans just like us. They don't have. They're not as powerful as we really think they are. And the more we try and chip at them and try and decrease their funds and try and make life difficult for them, you're making life difficult for everybody across the board.
Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. We do the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. If you want to catch the full show, tune in to this channel, subscribe, hit the like button, or check us out on iTunes and Spotify, and we will soon have this podcast up for free on all podcast platforms. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all in the next episode.